Jack Harris thought the worst pain of his life was the war he left behind. Until one night, in a rundown alley, he handed his last dollar to a little girl he'd never seen before. Rien pour. And from her trembling lips came a whisper, fragile, yet haunting, that cut him deeper than any wound he'd carried from the battlefield. But what was hidden in that whisper that could bring a hardened soldier to tears? Holden Spoon, Maplewood. November. The rain came down steady, and Jack Harris, a veteran, dragged himself along like the storm had rotted him too. His crutch tapped a dry, sharp rhythm on the wet sidewalk, loud enough to make folks turn their heads. Jack Harris, 45, wearing an old army jacket faded at the seams, moved slow toward the last lit spot on the block. The Golden Spoon. The only diner still glowing in Maplewood on a late afternoon like this. The sun had gone down early. Neon spilled from the sign onto the slick red bricks. The smell of wet earth mixed with burnt grease hung in the air. Every step sent a stab up his left knee. The same one ripped apart 17 years back in Fallujah. He stopped at the door, breathing short, eyes peering through fogged glass. Inside looked warm. Locals scattered at their booths, eating early dinners. Faces he half knew: the Photoshop owner, the widow who mailed care packages in '08, a couple of high school kids bussing tables. Nobody looked his way. Nobody recognized him. Jack pushed through. The little bell rang overhead. That sound short, clean. Round pierced straight into his skull like the plink of shell casings hitting concrete. His head twitched. His hand clenched the crutch. No one moved. A few glanced up. Quick. The waitress. Ruth, over 50 now. Makeup worn thin. Collar faded, gave him a crooked smile. Evening. Jack. Same spot. He nodded. Didn't speak. His eyes heavy. Back bent. He shuffled to the far corner. Into the shadows. The chair creaked when he sat. From his pocket, he pulled a folded, worn-out dollar bill. Set it flat on the table like a ritual. Ruth came over. Set down a glass of warm water. How about something hot? Nasty night. Jack shook his head. Just let me sit. Not hungry. She hesitated, then said softly, "Water's on the house," and walked away. No one asked about him, but he felt the stares. Some pity, some just curious. He was used to it. He leaned back against the wall, eyes on the rain-streaked window. Drops slid down the glass like bloodstains. And then the sound. Clack. Clack. A spoon against a glass at the next table. Light. Thin. But to Jack, it was metal ringing across the desert. Iraq. He froze. His pupils tightened, and in a blink, it all collapsed inside his head. Dust. Blasts. The ground shaking. Mike, his closest friend, crouched beside him in a pit. Shirt soaked red. Pushing an MRE his way. Eat. Jack. Not hungry. Then the hiss. The blast. Fire tore through. Mike fell forward, eyes still open. Jack shot up from his chair. The glass tipped. Crashed. Shattered loud as a gunshot. The whole diner jerked. A baby cried sharp until its mother pulled it close. Jack's breath came fast. Knuckles white against the table. Ruth rushed over. Voice sharp, but quiet. "Jack, you okay? Want me to call a doctor?" He didn't answer. Sweat trickled down his brow. His shoulders heaved, like every breath might be the last. Finally, he shook his head. His hand trembled as he pulled a handkerchief. Wiped the table. I'm sorry. It's all right. I'll clean it," Ruth said. Softer now. Sad eyes on him. Everyone knew he'd served. Not everyone understood. Jack stayed still, staring at the broken glass on the tile. A draft slipped through the door, cool against his neck. He turned toward the window again. At first, just a shape. A shadow. Then he saw them eyes. A child's eyes. Dark. Wide. Pressed to the wet glass. Locked on him. He froze. His heartbeat stumbled. A girl stood outside in the rain. Face pale. Hair stuck down. Eyes steady. Watching him. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just stared. Like she'd been waiting all night for someone to notice. For someone who might save her. Jack turned away by instinct. Dragged in a breath. But he looked back. Still there. Still those eyes. Drilling deep. His hand tightened on the crutch. He rose. Slow. Just a shadow in the storm. Blurred through wet glass. He reached the door. Touched the pane. But when he stepped forward, ready to go out, she was gone. Only streaks of rain remained. And the faint echo of a door in the alley closing soft behind her. The door of the Golden Spoon closed behind Jack with a soft thud. Rain pounded the awning overhead, spraying cold water onto his worn-out shoes. He stood there a moment, hand still tingling from the chill of the glass he'd just touched. The girl was gone, but her shadow still lingered. Like a ghost image burned onto his retinas. Those deep, black eyes clung to him, no pleading in them. But no letting go either. Jack took a sharp breath. Chest heaving. Cold air mixed with the smell of rain filled his lungs, dragging with it the scorched scent of old memories. He wiped at his cheek, didn't know if it was rain or tears. Across the street. The streetlight flickered on and off, casting a shaky yellow glow on the row of old brick buildings. The walls were chipped. Windows cracked. One of them patched with yellow duct tape. And right there, just seconds ago, that's where the girl had been. Now it was just a smear of rain trailing down the glass. Crooked like bloodstains. Jack inhaled deep. Then turned slowly toward the alley across the street, toward that run-down brick building. Dark and still. He didn't know why he was walking. Just those eyes. They weren't like anything he'd ever seen. They tugged something loose inside him. Like a piece of his soul got up and walked into a new face. His crutch tapped a steady beat on the wet pavement. The diner's glow faded behind him. He crossed the street. The tip of the crutch hit slick bricks clack. Clack, echoing down the empty block. Every step sent pain through his bad knee. But he didn't stop. The building had no sign. No doorbell. Just a rusted iron window frame with broken glass, patched with brittle duct tape that had long since lost its grip. He got close. Under the sagging awning. He leaned in and peeked through the cracked glass. And there she was. Emily. She was behind a curtain. Beige and yellowed. Full of little rips and holes. There wasn't much light inside, just a sliver of it coming from the street lamp. Enough to catch the edge of her face. Her hair was soaked. Matted across her forehead. Cheeks pale. But her eyes hadn't moved. They were locked on him. And this time, she didn't hide. Their eyes met him. A man who dragged his body through war. And her. A kid who'd somehow gone missing in her own town. Jack raised a hand. Slowly. He didn't wave. Didn't make a gesture to her. It was just something simple. A quiet way of saying, I see you. I know you're there. Emily's eyes twitched. Just a little. Then the curtain snapped shut. Hard. Deliberate. The sound of metal scraping the wall sliced through the air like a blade. Jack jerked back. Straightening up. His heart punched hard in his chest. Like someone had lit a firecracker right behind the window. He took a step back. And then from behind that curtain came a voice. Deep. Rough. Growling. What the hell you standing there for? The voice wasn't loud. Didn't have to be. It scraped its way through the air like an animal's breath, through gritted teeth. Jack froze. His hand gripped the crutch tight. He backed up another half step. Rain slapped the back of his neck. The battlefield flashed behind his eyes again, wounded men screaming in the sand pits. Someone calling his name through smoke. But this wasn't Iraq. This was Maplewood. And behind that rotting door was a little girl, begging silently for help. Jack swallowed hard. His eyes stayed locked on the trembling door, swaying gently in the wind like it was afraid too. In his head, the question looped again and again. Who the hell is she living with? The answer, he knew, was right behind that door. He moved, just slightly, trying to find another angle to see through. But heavy footsteps thudded inside the house, clumsy, loud, dragging. Then the clink of glass rolling across old floorboards. Jack stopped moving. His breath stuck halfway up his throat. He knew that sound. Those weren't a kid's feet. And they sure as hell weren't a mother's. That was the heavy stagger of a grown man, drunk, mean, stumbling in the dark. He turned his head to look down the street. Empty. Just rain tapping out its rhythm. No witnesses. No help. He looked back at the door. Emily's eyes were gone now, but they hadn't left his mind. Big, black, and shaking. That look, it had busted through the fence he'd kept around his heart for years. Inside, the voice growled again. Louder this time. Meaner. I said, "What the hell you doing out there?" Then came a sharp thud, like a bottle slammed hard on a table. Jack clenched his jaw. And in that second, he knew he had two choices. He could turn around, limp back to his empty apartment, crawl into the same chair, stare at the same wall, let the past keep him numb and the pain keep him quiet. Or he could walk straight into the dark, toward the voice, toward the girl. Wind blew down the alley, and a rusted tin sign above the door creaked back and forth. Jack closed his eyes for one breath. And in his head, Mike's voice came back, just like it had in the desert. Live. Jack. Live for both of us. Jack opened his eyes. They were sharp now. Steady. Fixed on the door. The wood shook suddenly. Hinges groaned. And from the narrow gap beneath it, after a few seconds of silence, he heard a sound. A soft sob. Held back. Buried. The kind of cry someone tries to hide in the palm of their hand. The rain kept falling like it was trying to wash away the past. And Jack stood there, caught between the freezing now and a memory that never quite closed. He wasn't sure how long he'd been standing there. In front of that old wooden door. Time had stopped, meaning anything. In his hand was a crumpled dollar bill. Damp and soft, now. The corners curling up. That's all he had left in this world. Back at the VA hospital last year, one of the doctors had told him, sometimes it only takes a small act to keep a man tethered to the world. And now, standing here, he knew that little girl needed that act more than he did. The door stayed shut. No sound. No movement. But Jack could feel her on the other side. Still there. Still trembling. Still silent. He looked down again at the dollar. Rain had already soaked into the fibers, leaving a dark line along the edge. I'm giving you this. All right, he said. Not loud. I don't have much, but it's yours now. No answer. He leaned forward and gently placed the bill near the crack at the base of the door where a breeze might sneak through. Then, from inside, a soft rustling. A small hand, tiny, slipped out through the crack. Bones thin. Skin cold. It grabbed for the bill in a quick, nervous motion. His hand still held one edge. She pulled. Just a little. He didn't let go right away. What's your name? He asked. Eyes focused on the narrow dark line where her hand had come through. No response. Just breathing. And that was enough. He let go. Her hand disappeared. The door didn't slam shut. It just eased back slowly, like she was leaving it open just in case. Jack sat down on the stoop, leaned his crutch against the wall beside him. Rain ran down his shoulders, but he didn't care. All he could think about was that look. The way that girl had looked at him like he was the last lifeline in a sinking world. Like if he just stayed a minute longer, maybe her world wouldn't cave in tonight. Emily. He didn't need to ask. He knew. Her name was Emily. 14 years ago, there was another night like this. Ramadi. Mud everywhere. Rain mixing with sand. He and Mike were crouched in the trench, waiting on orders. Mike had reached into his pocket and pulled out a crushed chocolate bar. The wrapper was half melted. The thing was barely holding together. "Take it," Mike said. "You need it more than me. I'm not hungry." Mike grinned, face smeared with dust and sweat. Starving or blown to pieces doesn't really matter, does it? But if we're still breathing come sunrise, you owe me one. An hour later, Mike was gone, and Jack hadn't touched chocolate since. A soft creak behind him. Jack turned his head. The girl, Emily, was stepping outside, barefoot, drowning in an old oversized shirt, sleeves hanging past her knees. Her hair was a mess, stuck to her forehead with rainwater. She didn't say a word. She didn't flinch. She just clutched that wet dollar to her chest, like it was the one thing in the world keeping her afloat. Jack didn't speak. He didn't need to. Her being there was enough. She walked toward him. Slow. Careful. Step by step on the wet bricks. The diner lights across the street threw a faint glow that caught her shadow long and lonely, dragging behind her like a second self. When she was just an arm's length away, she stopped. "Tonight," she said, voice thin and shaky. "I won't have to sleep hungry." Jack swallowed hard. In one sentence, she wasn't just talking about food. She was talking about the dark, the fear, the silence. One night, just one where maybe someone in this world still gave a damn. "Good," Jack said. That's all he could manage. And even that scraped his throat raw. She nodded, then slowly backed away, step by step, until the shadows swallowed her up again. The door didn't slam. It just closed gently behind her, like an invitation without words. Jack knew what was behind that door wasn't just Emily. It was something else. The stench of old liquor, heavy footsteps, that thick, wrong silence that settles over a place where nobody feels safe. And he just handed a little girl back into it, back through that door with nothing more than his last dollar in her hand. Jack clenched the crutch, got to his feet, eyes locked on the doorframe. Rain dripped from his chin. Then crash. The sound of glass shattering inside, and the roar of a man's voice, feasting.com. Thick with booze and rage. "You went outside." "Who?" "You think you can just walk out? Some alleys in a town everybody knows by name doesn't mean they ever talk about them." For Jack, Oakwood Alley wasn't just another street. It was a scar. A rough, open wound on the face of a town that liked to think of itself as clean. He stood there, heart pounding like he was back in uniform. Boots in the sand. That sound of breaking glass it didn't need explaining. He'd heard it too many times. It never came alone. Then the yelling started again. A man's voice, thick and low, soaked in liquor and years of rot. "You little bitch, where the hell you think you're going? I told you never to step outside." Jack's jaw clenched. Rain washed down his face like sweat used to during overnight stakeouts. His legs were heavy, but they moved, steady as ever. He circled the front door and followed the narrow cut leading into the alley behind the building. His crutch hit the cement in rhythm. Tap. 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 Each strike a nail driven into something deeper than anger. Oakwood Alley wasn't far. Just a couple blocks off the town square. But when you turned down it, the streetlights faded like they were ashamed to keep watching. The air turned stale. Old tarps fluttered, half shredded in the breeze. Spray-painted walls crusted with mold. Smelled like garbage and cheap beer, and shirts hung out to dry but never got there. Jack wasn't shocked. He'd seen worse. But it wasn't the alley that chilled him, it was the silence inside those walls. Windows sealed. Curtains drawn. No one coming out. Like the whole street agreed to look the other way. He pressed on. Emily's tracks were still fresh. Little wet prints on broken tile. Not spaced far short legs. Walking fast. At the end of the alley, he found it. A squat wooden house with rotting trim and warped tin roofing. Paint cracked off the siding in long curls. One window on the left was cracked open. Yellow light spilled out in a tired glow. And the shouting hadn't stopped. "Sarah! Where's that kid? You let her outside again." Then a crash like furniture being tossed across the room. Jack lowered himself beside the window, wincing as his left knee flared up. Didn't matter. He leaned just close enough to peer through the sliver of space. Inside was a narrow room with peeling paint and water stains bleeding down the ceiling. A big man paced across it, barrel shoulders. Patchy bald head. Greasy stubble on his chin. A glass bottle dangled from one hand. Half empty. His face was flushed red. Eyes shot with redder. In the corner, a woman huddled. Rebecca. Brown hair tangled. Wearing a faded t-shirt, 3 sizes too big. Curled up tight around a little girl. Emily. She clutched that crumpled dollar like it was the only thing keeping her on this planet. Her face was white as sheetrock. No tears. Just that blank, far-off look like none of this surprised her anymore. "Richard," Rebecca tried to reason with him. Voice cracking. She was only out for a second. "A second?" he bellowed, storming toward her. He slapped her across the face, open palm. Loud and fast. Her body recoiled, like it had done this dance before. The bottle swung wild in his hand. "You let her go out. She disappears. We lose our checks. You think those community folks keep paying if she runs off?" Jack's hands curled into fists. The pain in his knee meant nothing. Not compared to the pressure building behind his ribs. He backed away from the window. Circled to the front porch. The door wasn't locked all the way. Hinges squeaked from rust. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small blade. Habit from his service days. Slipped it into the latch. One twist. The lock gave with a soft pop. Suddenly his head flashed. 10 years back. Some warehouse outside Mosul. He kicked open a door and dragged out 2 buddies hogtied on the floor. One of them was named Daniel. Owed Jack his life ever since. Now here he was, different war. Different kid, but the same damn door. "Rebecca. Go buy me more booze, I'm dry." "There's no more money," she whispered. "Just that dollar. That dollar." Richard snarled. Espon. Storming toward Emily. Ripping the bill from her hands. She fought back. Screamed out. "No. That's mine." His hand came up. Bang. The door flew open. Jack burst in. Richard spun around. Face contorted in rage. "Who the hell?" Jack didn't speak. Planted the crutch firm on the wood floor. Took a step. Then another. Richard bared his teeth. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Old man." Jack didn't flinch. "I want you away from them." His voice didn't shake. Each word dropped like a hammer. Emily turned. Eyes wide. For the first time, the fear melted. Something else came in. Relief. Like maybe, just maybe, somebody finally showed up. Richard took a drunken step forward. "You crippled or what? What are you gonna do? Bore me to death?" Jack stood tall. The wind from the open door blew the curtain aside, laying bare the whole miserable scene. The smell of damp, cheap liquor, that sharp twinge of blood, and something else, the stink of pure human cruelty. "I've killed before." Jack's voice was gravel. "I've stood face to face with death and lived, and I'll be damned if I let you lay another finger on that child." Richard blinked, took a step back. Then, smash. The bottle hit the floor, shattered into shards. Richard let out a roar and lunged straight at Jack. The light in the room flickered, not because the bulb was dying, but because everything in that space felt like it was on the edge of breaking. The bottle, the man's raised hand, the silence before the next shout. Even the air felt tight, like the whole house was bracing for impact. Richard Doyle staggered where he stood, still foaming from his last scream. His eyes were clouded over, veins bulging red. The spilled liquor soaked into the cracked floorboards like blood pooling in sand. Jack had barely stepped inside, 10 seconds. Maybe less, when Richard wheeled and roared again. "What the hell are you just standing there for?" Rebecca didn't even have time to flinch. Richard shoved her hard, slamming her narrow frame into the wall. The thud wasn't loud, But the way her body folded, arms curling in, said everything. Jack felt it like it had cracked something in his ribs. Emily screamed, high-pitched and raw. It ripped through the room like a siren. She ran for her mother. But Richard snapped. "Shut your damn mouth." He raised a hand, not a strike this time, but a block, and the girl stopped cold. She backed into the corner, hugging her own arm like it might disappear. Jack took a step forward. The crutch let out a sharp creak on the warped floor. "Enough," he said, voice low, teeth clenched. "Right now." Richard turned, drunk eyes twitching, his lip curled, tongue licking at a crack in his mouth. "Who the hell are you?" "Some retired army nobody." "This is my house." Jack stared back. "No, it ain't. A house ain't a house when there's violence inside." That's all it took. Richard charged. Jack brought up the crutch barrier. Not weapon. Richard didn't even stop. But he slipped. His boot caught a shard of broken glass and twisted. His arms flailed for balance. Jack didn't wait. He stepped in, fast as his body would let him, moving toward Rebecca and kneeling to help her up. Richard was still growling behind him. "You think that makes you some kind of hero?" Jack didn't answer right away. Rebecca was trembling as she leaned on his arm. Then he said, "No. But you're not laying another hand on them tonight." Emily rushed forward, wrapping both arms around her mother's waist, shaking all over like a dry leaf in a storm. Richard bent down, picked up a piece of the broken bottle, and twisted a grin. Hero types like, "You don't mind pain. Right. That's the whole deal. Ain't it?" Jack stepped in front of them, blocking their view. Something on the shelf caught his eye. A photo frame. Tilted. Dusty. The glass chipped. A soldier, in a navy uniform, standing tall, smiling, holding a baby girl barely standing. That baby was Emily. The photo was old, edges curled, one corner burnt from maybe a stovetop or a careless cigarette. But the man's eyes, they burned bright, full of something Jack hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Jack's heart sank. He knew that face. David Miller. He remembered reading the name years back on a casualty list from Fallujah. A Navy transport driver, killed when his Humvee hit an IED. Now his daughter was in this house, hiding behind her mother, clutching a dollar bill like it was a lifeline. Jack bit down. Hard. His jaw tightened. Richard was closing in again. Glass shard clenched in his hand. "Put it down," Jack warned. "Nope. You're not going to get a second warning." Richard sneered, spit running down his chin. "I don't hit more than once." Then crack. Jack's heel crushed, another sliver of broken glass underfoot. The sound froze the moment. Richard snapped his head. His eyes bulged. No words, now, just the guttural roar of a man charging like a bull. Jack didn't hesitate. Everything slowed. He didn't remember the swing Richard threw, just that he blocked it. Crutch up. Hard clash. A numbness shot through Jack's arm. The glass bottle dropped, hit the floor, shattered a second time. Jack swung back, wide, caught Richard across the ribs, not the head, but enough to knock him sideways. Rebecca screamed. Emily cried out. Jack's knee buckled a little, pain radiating down his leg. One foot slipped on something, liquor or blood. He couldn't tell. The room was a damn trench now. Tight. Loud. No cover. Just instinct. Richard wasn't done. Blood streaked down his chin now. But he was coming again. Wild. Jack braced. The crutch was no longer support. It was defense. It was the only thing standing between a drunk animal and two people already pushed to the edge. He fought. Not to hurt. Not to win. But to end it. He fought for Mike. For the promises left broken in another sand-covered hell. For this kid, who deserved better than a lifetime of bruise-colored silence. Richard stumbled. Jack took one last swing. Caught him square in the shoulder. Richard hit the ground. Hard. He groaned. Rolled once. Then stopped moving. Breathing ragged. Dazed. Done. The house fell still. Just the sound of Jack gasping. The storm is still hammering the tin roof. The sharp drip of spilled liquor. Rebecca pulled Emily in, both of them shaking. Jack looked back, bent down, and picked up the photo from the floor. He held it toward Rebecca. "Is this Emily's father?" She nodded, too stunned to speak. Her lip was cracked, bleeding. Tears fell silently onto Emily's hair. Jack turned to the girl, handed her the photo. "You keep this." "All right. Nobody gets to take that from you." Emily didn't cry. She just nodded, gently pulling the picture to her chest, right alongside that wrinkled dollar, still clutched in her hand. Then, the back door swung open. Another figure stepped into the house. Broad shoulders, arms covered in tattoos. Same look in his eye Richard had when Jack first stepped through the front door. His voice dropped low. "What the hell's going on in here?" Jack planted his crutch in the doorway and shouted, "That's enough." Richard didn't stop. And worse, two more men showed up right behind him. The room twisted into chaos. Jack braced himself, legs shaking, knees screaming in pain. He could feel his whole right side buckling, like the bones were trying to fold in on themselves. Richard raised a shard of broken bottle high, gleaming, and pressed it right to Emily's neck. Footsteps thundered from the back of the house like war drums. Jack whipped around, crutch horizontal, blocking the exit. His chest heaved like he'd been locked inside a gas mask for hours. The man who entered next reeked of cigarette smoke and sweat. He flipped his hair back, to the grease from it hitting the walls like it belonged there. His eyes scanned the room. Didn't need to ask. That look said it all. He wasn't here to help. "The hell's going on here?" He grunted. Richard, barely steady on his feet, let out a sick laugh. "Old friend," he wheezed. "I was just teaching some lessons." Then this one decided to play hero. The newcomer looked around. Shards on the floor. Blood. Rebecca clutching Emily in the corner. Jack standing in the middle, leg trembling. "What's with the kid?" he asked. "Not out to concern. Just curious." Richard bent down and picked up another jagged bottleneck, still sharp, still dangerous. He wiped the blood on his jeans and pointed at Jack. "You know he's killed a man before. Not in a war. Right here. In this town." Jack didn't answer, just tightened his grip on the crutch. His lips pressed thin. The pounding in his head matched the sound of warning sirens he used to hear out in Baghdad. The man tilted his head, smirked. "You ex-military?" Jack nodded once. "Just a man protecting a child. Kids ain't your problem." "You're wrong about that." Richard spat and turned toward his buddies. "He thinks he's Emily's dad. Can you believe that?" Then a second man stepped in. Quiet. Didn't say a word. But his eyes worked the room. From Jack's crutch, to Rebecca, to Emily, to the photo in her hand. He smirked. "Oh. She's the soldier's little girl." That one line, it cracked something inside Jack. His spine tightened. Cold sweat down his back. Like ice. Not just fear. Rage. "Step away from the door," Richard ordered. "She's going back to her room. This is family business." Jack didn't move. One step. Two steps. Richard charged. "I said, enough." Jack roared. He raised the crutch to block. The first move wasn't to win, it was to stay upright. The second was to survive. Richard crashed in. His heel slipped on the liquor-stained floor. The bottle in his hand scraped across Jack's shoulder, slicing open a shallow gash. Jack flinched. Pain shot through him like a lit fuse. He staggered back, barely kept from falling. "Back off," he barked. But his voice was starting to break apart. The other two jumped in. One swung behind him, trying to flank. The other came at him with a metal pipe raised high, like he was going to smash concrete. Jack turned, tight to the wall, brought the crutch up just in time. The steel slammed into it, numbing his entire arm. His vision blurred. He remembered Mosul. The blast behind him. Mike dropping in slow motion. That same sound of tearing metal. Same color of blood. And Mike's last words. Don't let her grow up afraid. Rebecca screamed. Emily, run. But it was too late. Richard broke through, grabbed Emily by the collar, yanked her from her mother's arms. No. Rebecca sobbed. Jack turned. 1 second. 2 seconds. Richard had her, arm around her chest, broken glass to her throat, his hand shaking but holding firm. The room dimmed. The bulb overhead flickered, light catching the jagged edge of that glass. You take another step, Richard hissed. I'll send her to meet her father. Jack stopped cold. The air collapsed in on itself. Nobody breathed. Like a freeze-frame photo. Grey. Silent. Like the moment before impact. Emily didn't cry. She closed her eyes, as if not seeing would make the fear go away. Jack stood there, sweating through his shirt, legs wobbling, knees threatening to give out, but he didn't fall. Richard, he whispered, put her down. You do this. You're a dead man. And right then, with those black eyes fixed on him, he realized his life wasn't his own anymore. It was tied to that fragile look, that hope that he wouldn't vanish. The door swung open. A woman stepped in. Small frame. Blonde hair pulled back neat. White coat. Name tag clipped to her chest. Eyes steady. Voice even. Mr. Harris. She said, I'm Dr. Karen. I work with veterans and with kids who've been through trauma. You need us. And so does she. Jack frowned. I'm fine. Just get me discharged. I'll handle her myself. Karen didn't blink. She met his stare. You've been silent for years. Silence doesn't heal. It buries. Last night, you collapsed because you pushed too far. Keep going like this. You won't have the strength to protect anyone. Not her. Not yourself. Jack turned away, eyes climbing to the sterile ceiling. Her words dragged him back to those nights he sat alone in the dark, sweating through his shirt. Every clink of a spoon in a diner hitting his brain like shell casings. He whispered, Mike died right next to me. I couldn't save him. After that, I didn't want to talk to anyone anymore. Karen nodded slowly. I believe you. But look, she motioned toward Emily, who was shading in the dark mass on her drawing. Her small shoulders shook as she pressed down the pencil. If you keep quiet, she'll only learn to swallow her fear. She needs to see someone show it's okay to be scared. To admit weakness. That's the only way she learns. Fear doesn't mean she's broken. Jack exhaled, long and low. He remembered Emily's whisper before he blacked out. Don't leave me. If he kept pretending to be made of stone, she'd never believe there was any way out. He turned back, jaw tight, and gave a slow nod. All right. I'll try. The therapy room was small. Warm light. Yellow lamps instead of hospital glare. A low wooden table. Round padded chairs. A vase of lavender on the sill, giving off a faint calm scent. Jack sat with his back stiff, crutch propped against the wall. Across from him, Dr. Karen, calm as stone. In the corner, Emily sat at a child's table with a box of crayons. Start anywhere, Karen said. Wherever the memory is clearest. Jack shut his eyes, and the desert came back like it had been waiting just outside the door. The heat, the smoke, the hiss of incoming fire. Mike beside him, pushing an MRE into his hand. Eat. Jack. Not hungry. Eat. Could be the last night. Then the roar. The flash. And Mike crumpled beside him. Eyes still open. Jack's fists closed so hard, his knuckles went white. I broke the promise. I lived. He didn't. I came back. But I never came all the way back. Karen listened. Didn't cut in. Just a slow nod. You've carried that death for 17 years. But think about this last night. You didn't walk away from Emily. You did the opposite. You broke that old pattern. You saved her. Jack was quiet. Inside, something shifted. Not much. Just a fraction. But it moved. Across the room, Emily added more to her drawing. A stick figure. Rough. Standing tall between the girl and the looming shadow. The crutch drawn across, like a barrier. Jack swallowed hard. His eyes burned. She wasn't just drawing fear anymore. She was drawing belief. Days passed. Rebecca was moved to the same ward. Her arms and face marked with bruises, but her eyes clearer than before. When she saw Jack sitting there, she froze, then broke down in tears. "Thank you," she said, voice cracked. "If you hadn't been there, I'd have lost her." Jack shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. Daniel, the cops, and you. You're still standing. That counts." Rebecca pulled Emily close. For the first time since that night, Emily laughed. A high, shaky giggle, muffled against her mother's chest. It rang through the ward like the first sunlight after winter. Jack sat there and listened. Inside, it felt like someone had lit a match. Small, but warm. One afternoon, the rain finally cleared. Jack sat by the window, watching cars drift slow down the street below. The world moved on. Emily had fallen asleep at the table, arms tucked under her head, still clutching both the photo of her father and that crumpled dollar bill. Dr. Karen had just wrapped another session. She paused by the door. "You're heading the right way. Don't be afraid to speak. Silence chained you long enough." Jack nodded. "I'll try." The room settled, calm, until the phone on the nightstand rang. Loud, jarring. Karen picked up, listened, then turned, her face tightening. "The court just set a date. Richard's trial is coming up. And Rebecca," she looked at the mother and daughter, "you're required to testify." Rebecca froze. Color drained from her face. Emily stirred awake, clutching her tighter. The room went heavy. No one spoke. Only the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence. Jack sat there, motionless, one hand resting on Emily's drawing of the shadow. The phone still buzzed faintly in its cradle, like a heartbeat urging them forward. Ahead lay another battlefield, not one of sand and bullets, but of truth. A fight that had to be faced in the open, under oath. A fight where the only weapon left was the courage to speak. The night before the trial, the hospital lay wrapped in silence. Long pale hallways stretched out under the buzz of neon lights, cold glow bouncing off tile floors. Jack sat in his room, wide shoulders slumped under the kind of weight a man carries for years, staring through the window. Outside, Maplewood twinkled with scattered street lamps, but to him, it wasn't a town anymore. It looked like a battlefield, like 10 years ago in the desert quiet. Waiting, watching, and dangerous. Rebecca sat in the corner, back pressed to the wall. Hands locked together so tight, her knuckles showed white. Her face was pale, drained of blood. Every time Emily shifted in her sleep on the cot, Rebecca jumped, like the sound alone might bring disaster. Jack knew that fear too well. It was the same fear soldiers carried the night before a mission. Sleep didn't escape them because they weren't tired. It escaped because they knew tomorrow might tear them apart. His voice came rough, breaking the silence. "You can't stay quiet." Rebecca turned her head. Her eyes glistened. "You don't understand. Richard, he'll look at me." Her throat closed up, the words choking off. "I'm scared." Jack pushed himself up on the crutch, dragged himself over, sat down beside her. No rush, no pressure, just there. He laid his scarred hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "That kid needs the truth," he said, each word heavy as iron. "If you stay quiet, the shadow follows her for the rest of her life. I've seen what she draws, the big dark thing swallowing her whole. You want her living trapped in that picture forever?" Rebecca didn't answer. Her eyes fell to Emily curled on the cot, hugging a folded drawing under her pillow. Jack pressed on. "I stayed silent for years. Lost myself in it. Don't make her pay the same price." A tear slid down Rebecca's cheek. She nodded. Small. Barely there. "But I promise. Morning broke thick in Maplewood. The air itself felt heavy. Word of Richard's trial had swept across the town like wildfire. Everyone knew who he was. A veteran gone rotten. A man who turned cruelty into a way of life. Folks whispered, but few had ever dared look him in the eye. At the courthouse, barricades were up, patrol cars blocking the ends of the street. People gathered in knots, murmuring, some with pity, some with hunger for spectacle. The escort car rolled up. Jack, Rebecca, and Emily stepped out into the cold wind. The trees rattled, leaves skittering along the pavement. Emily clutched Jack's hand, her tiny palm icy. Rebecca walked stiff beside them, her face locked, but her steps steady. Dr. Karen walked with them. Her presence was calm as a warm blanket. You'll be protected, she assured. No one can touch you here. Jack nodded, though he knew better. The truest protection wasn't in the guns or the walls. It was in Rebecca's voice, standing up and telling what happened. The waiting room outside the courtroom was colorless and cold. Gray walls, wooden benches worn down by years of bodies sitting tense. The yellowed bulbs overhead hummed. Rebecca sat in the middle, her fingers twisting together. Emily sat beside her, sketching again. This time the pencil carved out a new figure, a man with a crutch, standing tall between the girl and the shadow. Jack looked down at it, his chest clenched. He bent close and whispered, "You're not alone." The door creaked. A uniformed officer stepped in. "It's time." The air thickened. Rebecca trembled, but Jack steadied her with a firm hand on her shoulder, guiding her to her feet. "Let's go," he said. "Emily and I will be right here." Rebecca looked at him. Fear still swam in her eyes, but so did gratitude. The heavy doors of the courtroom swung open. Inside was a wide chamber, light streaming down from the high ceiling. Wooden benches lined up in neat rows, packed with townsfolk holding their breath. Rebecca stepped forward, hands shaking. Emily clung tighter to Jack's arm. With every step, the crack of Jack's crutch on tile echoed like a drumbeat before battle. At the front, the witness stand waited. Above it, the judge sat high, face stern. The tension pressed down so hard, Jack could hear the pulse hammering in his own ears. Rebecca faltered. Half a step. Jack leaned close, voice low. "That child needs the truth." She drew in a deep breath, took the next step, and Jack was pulled backward into memory, walking into enemy ground with his unit. Silence thick. Every bootstep threatening to trigger the earth itself. Mike had grinned once. Side by side. "Let's go." "Jack, if you're scared, I'll go first." Mike went first, and never came back. Now, Rebecca was walking forward, and Jack swore he wouldn't let her vanish into darkness like Mike. Metal clanked. The courtroom doors slammed again. Richard entered, shackled, flanked by 2 deputies. Orange jumpsuit hanging loose, hair wild, eyes red-rimmed and mean. The second he crossed the threshold, his eyes roamed the room and locked on Rebecca. That stare, cold, poisoned, a predator's glare. Rebecca froze, her hand clenched until the knuckles turned white. Jack's grip tightened on the crutch, his body wound taut, like a bowstring pulled back to breaking point. The door closed behind Richard, but his eyes stayed glued to her, like a caged animal still baring its teeth. The air in the courtroom turned heavy, ready to split wide open. The courtroom was packed wall to wall. Not a cough, not a whisper, just silence, so heavy it pressed against your chest. Every eye fixed on the witness stand, where Rebecca was about to take her seat. The ceiling arched high above, sunlight cutting down through narrow windows, slicing the space into sharp blocks. It felt almost surgical. This side, justice. That side, darkness. No in between. Jack sat in the second row, crutch propped against his leg. Beside him, Emily's small hand clung to the edge of his coat. Her fingers were cold as ice. He leaned down, murmuring close to her ear, "It's all right. Just keep your eyes on me. You'll see you're not alone." She gave a tiny nod, Her eyes carried both fear and a fragile kind of faith. At the front, Rebecca stepped forward, each step heavy, as if the floor might open into a pit beneath her. Her whole frame shook. Her eyes stayed low. But then she caught Emily's gaze from across the room. That little girl was watching her, waiting, needing her to stand tall. Rebecca stopped, drew in one deep breath, and lifted her head. The judge struck his gavel. The crack echoed off every wall. The court will hear the witness. The prosecutor rose. His voice was calm but firm. Miss Rebecca, can you tell the court about the conditions in your home these past years? Rebecca swallowed hard. When her voice came, it trembled on the edge of breaking. I lived in fear. Richard drank constantly. He beat me. And he hurt my daughter too. A murmur rippled across the gallery. You could hear people sucking in sharp breaths. Rebecca's voice strengthened as she went on. I stayed quiet for too long. I was scared. I thought there was no way out. But that night, when he held that broken bottle to Emily's throat, I knew if I kept silent, I'd lose her forever. Her eyes were wet, but her voice carried through the chamber, clear as a bell. I testify that Richard Doyle beat us, over and over, and that night, he meant to kill us. Richard shot up from his chair. The chains on his wrists rattled. His face twisted, red and ugly. Lear, you lying bitch. I fed you. I kept a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me. 2 deputies forced him down. Iron cuffs, biting tight. The judge hammered the gavel again, voice booming. Order. Mr. Doyle. One more outburst, and you will be removed from this courtroom. Richard snarled, eyes blazing with hate. He locked on Rebecca, as if he could tear her apart with a stare alone. But for once, Rebecca didn't look away. Her shoulders shook, but her chin held firm. She faced him head-on, no longer bowing. For the first time in years, she stood in her own strength. The prosecutor turned toward Emily. His voice softened. Emily, would you like to speak? The room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. Jack bent toward her again, whispering low. You don't have to be afraid. Just tell the truth. Same way you drew it. Emily swallowed. Her little body trembled. But she rose to her feet, step by step. She crossed the floor, her worn shoes clicking faintly on the tile. She stopped in front of the judge, lifted her chin. Her face was thin, pale, streaked with tears, but her eyes held something fierce inside them. My name is Emily, she said, voice shaking. I remember my mom getting hit. I got hit too. But Uncle Jack saved me. The whole room went silent again. You could feel hearts breaking. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a wrinkled sheet of paper. She held it high. I drew this. The big black shadow, 'cause I felt it pressing down on me. But now, her lip quivered. But she steadied herself. Now I draw Uncle Jack in front, with his crutch, because he didn't leave me. Jack felt his throat close. His eyes stung. He turned his face away and gripped the crutch, so hard his hand went numb. The judge looked at Emily. The man was known for being stern, unmoved, a stone wall. But something cracked in his eyes then. He gave the smallest nod. The defense attorney scrambled, stammering out objections, poking holes. But the words rang hollow. They bounced uselessly against the mountain of truth already built. Rebecca's testimony. The bruises still visible. The old medical records. The photographs. Evidence lined up in an unbroken chain. The judge struck his gavel one last time. His voice rang out, filling the room. Having heard the testimony, reviewed the evidence, and weighed the facts. This court finds the defendant, Richard Doyle, guilty of domestic abuse and attempted murder. Sentencing: 15 years in state prison. The gavel cracked down. The sound thundered through the chamber. Rebecca broke. She sobbed openly, shoulders shaking. Emily collapsed into her arms, crying too, but this time it wasn't the sound of terror. It was release. A dam bursting. Jack sat still, the noise washing over him. In his chest, something unknotted. 15 years couldn't erase the shadow, couldn't undo the scars, but it carved out a space for a new path, for light to seep in. As the deputies dragged Richard out, he cursed and spat, voice hoarse. But the rage was empty now, stripped of power. His eyes, once weapons, were nothing more than broken glass. The crowd began to move. People filed out, murmuring. Some turned toward Jack, nodding, just small acknowledgements. But to him, they mattered. They weren't looking at him as the crippled vet anymore. They saw him as something else. A man who stood, and then Emily looked up. Her eyes shone, wet and trembling. She whispered so soft, only Jack could hear. "Can I call you, Dad?" Jack froze. His chest clenched. Then it broke open. He couldn't answer. Couldn't find words. His tears fell fast. But the corner of his mouth tugged into a fragile smile. He reached out, ran a rough hand through her tangled hair. In that courtroom, where one chapter had closed in chains, another opened quiet, tender, real. He pulled Emily close, said nothing, just nodded. Behind them, Rebecca wiped her eyes. For the first time in years, a smile, small, worn, but true, lit her face. The future was still uncertain. Shadows still lingered. But inside that courtroom, for the first time in a long time, there was something else. Hope. A few weeks after the trial, Maplewood felt different. The whole town seemed brighter. Like the long, hard winter had finally cracked open, letting in a softer season. In the center of town, the park stretched out under the morning sun. The maples had dropped their gold, laying carpets of leaves along the winding path that circled the pond. Sparrows chattered from branch to branch, their quick little notes mixing with the laughter of children running loose across the grass. Jack sat with his crutch, leaned against the old oak bench. The wood creaked under his weight, but he didn't mind. He let himself sit. Just sit. That in itself was new. For the first time in years, he could stop moving and not feel like the silence was a threat. Emily darted across the lawn. She wore a plaid dress a local women's group had sewn for her, the kind with careful stitches and a red ribbon tied into her messy hair. She skipped with the kind of joy that burned into the air, pure, unbroken. Nothing of the dark rooms and broken bottles showed in her steps now. Each bounce was sunlight. Rebecca sat a little ways off. There were still bruises beneath her eyes, the kind that don't come from fists, but from nights without sleep. Still, her gaze had changed. Softer now. She was talking with some of the town's women neighbors who had once whispered sharp things behind her back. Now they asked how she was holding up. Maplewood hadn't turned overnight, but it wasn't the same place that left her invisible. Jack drew in a deep breath. The air smelled clean, crisp. He let it fill him all the way. How long had it been since he sat in a park and didn't have to scan the tree line for movement? Since he could listen to wind through leaves without hearing artillery shells under it? Since he'd heard a child laugh and believed it? Too long. Emily ran, then stopped short. She bent down, her hands brushing through the damp grass. She looked up, face shining. "Dad, Jack. Look." She ran back, her palms open. In them, glistening with morning dew, lay a silver coin, worn thin, scratched over, edges dulled by years rolling, who knows where. She beamed, breathless. "I found it under that tree. It's our lucky coin." Jack took it in his palm. The metal was cool, heavy for its size. He turned it slowly, the grooves catching the sun. His chest tightened. He thought of that crumpled dollar bill in the rain, the night everything turned. A scrap of paper. Nothing to most. But it changed the course of both their lives. Now, another small piece of metal. And again, it felt bigger than it looked. He closed Emily's fingers over it, pressing gently. "Not just Mina," he said. "It belongs to all of us. To our family." Her eyes widened, wet and shining. She nodded hard. clutching the coin like it was treasure. Jack reached into his jacket. From the inner pocket, he pulled a leather notebook. Its corners were frayed. Its spine bent. The pages carried the weight of years. He flipped it open, running his finger down the lines. Names, scratched in by his rough hand. Friends, brothers, all lost. The last page bore one word. Shaky. Mike. His breath sank. Mike. His best friend. The one ghost who never left. You see this, buddy? Jack thought. I'm still here. I kept the promise. I didn't turn away from the kid. Not this time. He closed the book with a soft thud. The sound was light, but in his chest it landed like the end of a chapter. Emily leaned in, curious. What's in the book? Dad. The word stopped him. Not whispered like before. Not tentative. Clear. Firm. Dad. His chest caught. He froze a second, then rubbed her hair. Voice low. Names. The names of friends I lost. But now, I've got another reason to live. That's you. She smiled. Small but true. And hugged the notebook to her chest as though she could help carry it. As though she wanted the weight too. Around them, townsfolk strolled the paths. Some glanced over, and a few men tipped their caps. No pity in their eyes this time. An old janitor with a broom passed by. Gave Jack a nod and a smile. Good to see you back in the park. Harris. Looks right. Jack managed to smile in return. Tired, but honest. He realized it was the first time in years he hadn't felt like a stray dog wandering his own town. Rebecca watched from her bench. Her eyes glistened as she whispered, almost to herself, Maybe this town finally sees you're not just that crippled soldier. You're the man who saved my child. Jack shook his head. I only did what needed doing. You found your courage. We all played a part. Evening rolled slow across the park. The sun dropped low, spilling gold across the pond. Its reflection cut into bright streaks like broken glass, laid out in beauty. Emily sat cross-legged in the grass. Her crayons scattered. She drew with fierce concentration. Jack leaned over to see. His throat tightened again. No shadows this time. She had drawn 3 figures. A man with a crutch. A woman with brown hair. And a little girl with a red ribbon. They stood together under a wide tree. Above them, a round sun burned whole. Jack's lips curled at the corner. He never thought he'd see his life sketched like that. A family. Not perfect. Not whole. But enough. Enough to walk forward. He held the coin in his palm, spinning it once. As he watched, a buzz shook his pocket. The sudden vibration startled him. He pulled out his phone. A number he didn't know lit the screen. Below it, small letters read, Veteran Support Organization. His brows pulled together. His heart kicked. He'd seen their letters before. Tossed into piles. Left unopened. He'd never been ready. Emily peeked up. Who's calling? Dad. Jack looked at the screen. Then at her. He didn't answer right away. Because he knew. This wasn't just for him. This call was a hand reaching from the future, asking if he'd step forward. Not just to settle old ghosts, but to stand for what was left, and for the child who had chosen him as her father. The phone kept buzzing. Jack closed his hand around the coin. Felt the cool metal bite against his palm. His eyes lifted, looking out across the sunlit park, where leaves glowed like embers in the fading day. Another road was waiting. And this time, he wouldn't walk it alone. The story of Jack, Rebecca, and Emily reminds us that even the smallest act, a crumpled dollar bill pressed into a child's hand, or the fragile decision to finally speak the truth, can alter the course of a life. For those of us who have already lived through half a lifetime, carrying the scars of war, loss, or simply the long wait of ordinary struggles, what matters is no longer the impossible chase for perfection, but the quiet willingness to stay, to not turn away, when someone needs us most. Silence only lets the shadows grow thicker. Truth, no matter how raw, can scatter them. And kindness, even when it costs us something, has the power to open a door of hope for the generation that comes after us. It is never too late to begin again. Never too late to step into the role of a steady hand or a listening ear for another soul. Often, in offering that shelter, we are surprised to discover that we, too, are being carried back toward life. Because in protecting another, in giving them reason to believe the world can still be good, we quietly rediscover our own reason to keep walking forward. In the long shadow of war and wounds that never fully heal, Jack found a reason to stand again, not for himself, but for the clear, unblinking eyes of a child who needed protecting. The story closes in a small park in Maplewood, where laughter replaces screams, and a silver coin has become the fragile symbol of a new beginning. A soldier never truly comes home whole or see. Yet even the broken can carry light. Sometimes it is not strength or perfection that saves us, but the simple decision to stay, to reach out, and to hold on to someone else when the night is longest. What Jack discovered is what many of us learn, often late in life. Kindness, even when trembling, is enough to warm a heart and point the way forward. We may carry scars, but those scars can remind us where not to break again. And when we choose to stand beside another child, friend, or stranger, we are reminded that we are not finished yet, that there is still purpose in the days ahead. If you've ever witnessed a small moment that changed the way you see life, share it in the comments. Who knows, your story might be the light someone else is waiting for while they're stumbling in the dark.